In this lecture, you'll see how to install NetApp VSC Virtual Storage Console with a lab demo. The scenario is that I've already got an existing VMware vSphere environment and ONTAP storage, and I have already configured traditional NFS and iSCSI data stores for my ESXi hosts, but I've done that just the traditional old-fashioned way without using VSC. So when I configured those traditional data stores earlier, I configured the settings on the VMware side, and I configured the settings on the storage side separately. What I want to do now is to get VSC installed so I can follow the best practice of using VSC to provision my data stores and manage my storage environment for VMware. If you have a look at the lab topology diagram here, you can see that I've got a couple of ESXi hosts and I've got my storage system. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install the Virtual Storage Console virtual machine onto my ESXi2 host. I've got my VCSA virtual machine running on ESXi1, and VSC and VCSA have to be on different hosts, so that's why I'm going to put VSC on ESXi2. Now, up to this point, for management of all my devices and all my software, they've all been on the management network, which is the 172.23.1.0 network. But when I deploy VSC on ESXi2, I'm going to be using an OVA to deploy that. And when I deploy it, I have to select the network that this is going to be on, and it's going to be in the virtual machines network. So that is going to be in the 172.23.5.0 subnet. So for VSC, I'm going to give it the IP address 172.23.5.1. Now, when I do the installation of the VSC, part of the checks that the software will perform on itself is it checks that it can connect to the DNS server, and it does have an address record for itself in DNS. So because of that, I'm going to have to go onto my DNS server, which is the WinA host over here, and I'm going to add a DNS address record for the VSC, and I'm going to have to configure a reverse DNS lookup zone for the 172.23.5 network, just so that that DNS check from VSC during the installation is going to work. So let's do that now. So I will go on to my Windows host, and then in Server Manager, I will click on Tools, and I'm going to go to DNS, and I'll maximize this. I'll expand out my forward lookup zones, and the DNS zone here is FLACKBOX'S. So I'll click on that, and then over in the right-hand side of the window, I'll do a right-click and say New Host, A or AAA record. The name that I'm going to call this is VSC for Virtual Storage Console, and the IP address is 172.23.5.1. Now, actually, now I've done this, I see I'm going to get an error message because I need to have it ticked to create the associated pointer record in the reverse DNS zone. I haven't created that reverse DNS zone yet, so if I click on Add Host here, I'm going to get an error message. So let's just cancel out of this for now and go to Reverse Lookup Zones. You can already see that I've added one earlier for my management network. I'll right-click on Reverse Lookup Zones and say New Zone, because I need to create a new one. Click on Next in the wizard. It's going to be a primary zone. Click on Next. Accept the default for all DNS servers. Click Next. It's IPv4 Reverse Lookup Zone. Next. And the network ID is 172.23.5. And then click on Next, and Finish. So that's my reverse lookup zone added. So now I can go back to my FLACKBOX'S.lab zone, do my right click in here again. It's what I was trying to do earlier. Create a new A address record, and it is going to be named VSC, and the IP address 172.23.5.1, and I'll be able to add the host now that I've got the reverse lookup zone added. Okay, I can click on OK, and done. So that is VSC now added in DNS, and my reverse lookup zone added. So when I do the software installation of VSC and it does that DNS check, it's going to be successful. Okay, so let me just minimize back out of here again. The next thing that I need to do is download the VSC software. So I do that from the NetApp website. So I go to mysupport.netapp.com. I'm already logged in here. Hopefully it hasn't timed out yet. I'll click on downloads and then software. And then on the software download page, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there it is, Virtual Storage Console. The platform is going to be VMware vSphere, and I click on Go. And then on the next page, I'm going to download what's the latest version right now, which is 9.6. Click View and Download. When you're using Virtual Storage Console, do be careful about your software interoperability. So check the interoperability matrix to make sure that the version of ONTAP you're running and the version of vSphere you're running and the version of the virtual storage your console that you're running are all compatible with each other. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page here and then click on Continue. And then I can click on the download button and scroll down to the bottom again, accept the license agreement. And then the file that I want to download is the OVA file. So that is the pre-packaged virtual machine that's ready to install straight into VMware. So I will click on that to download it, and that is now going to download it to my download folder. The size of the file is quite large, so this is going to take a little while. So I'll pause the video here, and I'll come back when the download has completed. Okay, the download has completed, and I can see the OVA file there in my downloads folder. So to get this installed, I need to go to the Vsphere Client, which I've already opened. So I opened https vcsa.flackboxa.lab, and then I logged into the Vsphere Client from there. And I want to install this onto my ESXi2 host, which is at 172.23.1.32. So I'm going to select that and then right click on it, and I'm going to choose Deploy Ovf Template. And then I'm going to say it's a local file and click on Choose Files. And I'm going to browse to my download folder, and there is the OVA file there. I double click on that. OVA and OVF are basically synonymous with each other. So I select an OVF template, but I browse to the OVA file. I then click on Next, and the virtual machine name, I'm going to call this VSC, and I'm installing it into FLACKBOX'S Lab. I click on Next. And then the host I want to install it on is 172.23.1.32. Click on Next. It's then going to take a few seconds to validate this. Then it will show me a summary of the appliance. I can click on Next. Tick the checkbox to accept the license agreement. And then for the virtual disk format, I want this to be thin provisioned to save disk space. And I do want to install it onto ESXi12 local data store. Now, in a real-world environment, you would want the VSC's virtual disk to be stored on external SAN or NAS storage rather than on the ESXi host's local hard drive, because obviously that would give you better redundancy and resiliency. In the lab environment here right now, I have not connected ESXi2 to the external NFS or iSCSI data stores, which is why I'm not seeing them as an option here. I'm only seeing the local disk. So for this lab demo, I'm going to install VSC using the local disk on the host. That's still not a problem because I could use storage vMotion to move it over to the NFS or the iSCSI data store later. And click on Next. Then the network that this is going to be on is the virtual machine network. I select that and click on next. And right now I'm getting 3 properties have invalid values because I didn't fill in the settings on that page. So I'd better do that now. So for the application user password, I'm going to use FLACKBOX1 and an exclamation mark. I will confirm that, FLACKBOX1 and an exclamation mark again. The NTP server is my WinA host. That's also a domain controller and it's running as an NTP server. So I can use that. It is at 172.23.4.1. Then I'll scroll down a little bit here. The Vcenter server address, I'm going to use 172.23.5.1. I'll use the default port of 443 and the default username. And then the password is again going to use FLACKBOX1, an exclamation mark. And I will confirm that. For the host name, I'm going to use Vsc. For the IP address, again, it was 172.23.5.1. Don't need to enter the prefix length because I'm only using IPv4, not IPv6. The net mask is 255.255.255.0. The gateway is the BIOS router at 172.23.5.254. Primary DNS, 172.23.4.1, my Windows server, and the search domain is FLACKBOX'S.lab. So let me just scroll up and check that everything is configured correctly there. Yeah, okay, so the password I'm just using FLACKBOX1 exclamation mark everywhere. The NTP server is my WinA host, that's good. The Vcenter server address, okay, so I was rushing through this too much. I should have read what I was filling in. The Vcenter server address, that's my VCSA, and that is at 172.23.1.101. So 172.23.5.1 is the address I'm going to use for the virtual storage console virtual machine, but the VCSA that it's going to be registered with is at 172.23.1.101. So I've corrected that. It is the default port. That is the VCSA is username we're using for that is the default. And I entered the password there. And I see I've got a warning message. So these don't match up. So let's try typing that in again. FLACKBOX1 exclamation mark. That looks better. For this virtual machine, I'm going to call it VSC. It is going to have the IP address 172.23.5.1. Subnet mask is good, the gateway is good, primary DNS is good, and the search domain is good. Okay, so that was a lesson for me there. Don't rush too much. Take a second to actually look at what I'm filling in. But it was good that I double checked it, so it is all correct now. I can now click on next there. I get the summary page. Again, I can double check my settings here as well. I've already checked, it's all good, and I can click on finish. That is now going to deploy the package, and down here in recent tasks, I can see that as the task is completing. So this is going to take a little bit of time to deploy the template. So I'll pause the video again and come back when it has completed. Okay, the tasks have completed. So now I can expand out my ESXi2 host. And I can see there is the VSC virtual machine. So I will click on that. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to turn down the amount of memory allocated to the virtual machine. To get VSC installed, it needs to be installed on a host with at least 12.5 gigs worth of RAM. So I had that set on the ESXi2 to get it installed. Once you've got it installed, you can turn down the amount of RAM in a lab environment. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that in a real world environment, but here in my lab, I've got a limited amount of memory in my laptop, So to allow me to run all the other virtual machines, I'm just going to turn down the amount of RAM on here. So I'm going to select VSC, and then I'm going to go to Actions, and then in here, I'm going to edit the settings, and you can see that the memory is set to 12 gigabytes. That is set in the OVA file. So that's why I needed to have more than 12 gig on my ESXi2 host to get it installed. I'm going to turn this down to 4 gigabytes. Now, when I do that, obviously that's less than the recommended memory. I might get some warning messages thrown up about a lack of RAM, but it's still going to run okay. All right, so I'm going to do that. Also, I'm going to expand out memory here. And for the reservation, I'm going to set that to 0. And the other thing that I need to do here is on the CD and DVD drive, I'm going to change that to client device. So this is something you do actually do in the real world as well. In a real world environment, you do want to change this to client device, but leave the memory as it is. Okay, I can now click on OK there. So that's going to use up less memory. Because it's using up less memory, I can also set the memory lower on my ESXi2 host as well. So I will do that now. So I've currently got that running in VMware Workstation Professional. So I'm going to come in here. I need to power off the virtual machine to be able to change the RAM. So I'm going to right click on it here and go power. And I am going to shut down the guest. Click on shut down. This is going to take 30 seconds or so to shut down. So I'll pause the video here. I'll come back when the shutdown has completed. Okay, the virtual machine is shut down, so I'll now be able to edit the memory. So I'm going to double click on the memory here. And then I'm going to change it from 12.5 gig to 4.5 gigabytes. So in megabytes, that is 4608. I'll just click out here and check. Yeah, that is 4.5 gig. So that looks good. I can click on OK. So I've turned down the memory now. It's not going to use up so much resources on my laptop, just in our lab environment. I can power it back on again now. Again, this is going to take a minute or so to complete the boot up process. I'll pause the video again here and come back when it's done. Okay, the ESXi2 host has booted up again. So I can minimize this and go back to my Vsphere Client. And if I click on my VSC virtual machine, I need to power this on. And then as it is powering on, I'm also going to launch a console so I can get to the command line of the VSC as well. So I'll click on launch. And the reason I'm doing this is that we've got the Ovf template deployed right now, but it hasn't actually completed the total installation of VSC. There's another step we have to do, which is to install VMware tools. And you'll see that when the VSC finishes booting up here, it's actually going to prompt me to do that to complete the installation. So I just need to give this a little bit of time to finish its initial boot up here, and then we're going to see that prompt. And there we go. I can see it is telling me to install VMware tools. So I'll go back into the main window here, and you can see that while I've got the VSC selected, I've got a button here that I can use to install VMware tools. So I'm going to click on that and then click on Mount. And then that is going to install VMware tools for me. If I go back and look in here in the console window again, I can see that it is now starting to install VMware tools. And then the virtual machine will reboot. And that is the VSC installation now completed. I'll check that the services are running okay. So to do that, I'm going to log in with the maintenance account. So for the login here, I'm going to log in with a username of maint, short for maintenance, and the password is admin123. You can and should change that password later on. Now I'm going to go to the application configuration. So I'll enter choice number 1 and hit enter. And then I'm going to hit 1 again to display the server status summary. And there I can see that the virtual storage console and VASA provider and SRA are running. So the services all look good. I'll hit enter to continue and then X to exit. So that all looks good. I can close out of the console here now, and I will be able to see my virtual storage console menu in the Vsphere Client now. But if I click on menu, I see that it's not there yet. So what I need to do is to log out and log back in. So I'm going to log out here, and then that will log me out in a second. And then I'm going to clear my browser cache. The way that you do that in Chrome is click up here and then settings, and then go down to advanced, and then clear browsing data and clear data. And I can now close this, and actually I'll close Chrome as well, and then I'll reopen Chrome again. And I'm going to go to https vcsa.flackboxa.lab and advanced and proceed because of a certificate warning. And then I'm going to launch the Vsphere Client. And then for the login, I'm going to use administrator at vsphere.local. And my password of FLACKBOX1 and an exclamation mark, and hit enter to log in. And then when the login completes, I should hopefully be able to have a look in the menu again and see the virtual storage console in there. So let me just close this warning message and then go to menu, and I can see that yes, virtual storage console is available. Now, if you do that and you still don't see VSC there, what to do is just wait 5 minutes and then try again, and you should be good. Okay, so I'm going to click in virtual storage console, and what we can do now is just have a quick look around some of the basic settings of VSC. So I'll click on the settings page, and then in here under manage capabilities, you can see that the VASA provider is enabled and SRA is disabled. So those are the default settings. Then I'll click on the Unified Appliance Settings tab on the same page. And in here, I can see the default thresholds. For volume alarm thresholds for nearly full, that's going to be triggered at 80%. And for full, that will be triggered at 90%. And it's the same values for aggregate as well. So if your volumes or your aggregates are getting full, that are being managed by VSC, that is going to trigger an alarm. Okay, next thing to look at is up in the overview. I will have a look at the traditional dashboard. And in here, you can see that it says that data stores are not available and virtual machines are not available. You remember I said at the start of this video that we had traditional data stores already set up. Well, now we have got VSC installed and integrated with the Vsphere Client, so why are we not seeing anything in here? Well, it's actually because we haven't discovered the ONTAP storage. So when you do the install of VSC, that is going to integrate it with the Vsphere Client, but it also needs to pull information from the ONTAP cluster as well. So you need to connect it to the ONTAP cluster and specify the username and password you're going to use to connect with. So before I do that, let's just see what storage we do have set up. So I'll click on the menu and then go to storage. And then in here, you can see that I've got NASVol1, which is an NFS data store, and I've got SANLUN1, which is an iSCSI data store. So they are both configured on our ONTAP cluster. And you can see on the host tab that it's just the ESXi1 host that is connected to those right now. If I go to hosts and clusters, and you look at 172.23.1.31, you can see I've got a YVM1 virtual machine, and its virtual disk is in the SANLUN1 data store, and I've got a YVM2 virtual machine, and its virtual disk is in the NASVol1. So I do have traditional data stores configured, and they are in use by virtual machines. But again, when I go to VSC, it's not aware of them yet because I need to discover the ONTAP storage. To do that, I need to enter the credentials that I'm going to connect to the ONTAP cluster with first. So I'll go back to the settings page, and then on administrative settings, I'm going to configure the default credentials for storage system. I click on that, and it automatically populates this with the Vsphere login, which is completely different than what we're going to use for ONTAP. So I'm going to change this to the username of admin and the password of FLACKBOX'S. So those are the login credentials that I log into my ONTAP cluster with. Click on OK there. And then when it takes that, I'm going to go back to the overview page. And I'm going to click on the Getting Started tab, and I'm going to click on Discover Storage System. It's going to tell me it's going to start with discovery. Do I want to continue? I will click on Yes. And then what it's going to do now is it's going to look for data stores that are already configured in the system. It's then going to connect out to the ONTAP storage, and it's going to pull information in from there. So this will take a little bit of time. I can see it running through the process down here in the recent tasks. Now, while this is running, just in case it wasn't obvious, you don't need to have data stores configured already before you install and use VSC. In fact, typically you're not going to have data stores configured already, because best practice is to use VSC to configure them. I'm just showing you here that if you did have data stores already before you did install VSC, then VSC is able to discover those and able to manage them. Okay, so while we're waiting for this auto discovery to complete, let me quickly show you what you would do if you didn't have any existing data stores on ONTAP storage to discover, and you were going to be provisioning your first data store using VSC. What you would do is on the overview and getting started page again, rather than using discover, you would click on add. So I will do that now. And then you add your storage system. So for our example, that would be 172.23.1.21, the management IP address of our cluster, and then enter in the username and password that you use to log into the cluster. Then click on save, and then that is going to add the cluster for you, and you're then going to be able to see information about it and provision your data stores on there. Okay, so that's what you do when you are going to be using VSC for your first data store. We've already got data stores configured on there, so I'll cancel out of here, and the auto discovery should be just about finished. So I'll click on the storage systems page in here, and I see there we go, it has discovered the storage. So you can see it's discovered that it is cluster 2. It's running ONTAP version 9.5. The status is normal. And I can expand this out as well. And in there, I can see my SAN and my NAS SVMs. So VSC has gone out, connected to the ONTAP storage, and it has discovered the SVMs where my vSphere data stores have been configured. Okay, I can click on cluster 2 as well, and then click on actions and modify. And notice something that's quite funny in here is that the username is always going to show up with the Vsphere username, even though it is actually using the correct credentials. So don't worry when you see this, it is still going to use the credentials that you configured. We can click on provisioning options in here, and in here I need to enter the username and password again. So that is my username and password to log into the ONTAP cluster, and click on authenticate. And when it authenticates, you see the different provisioning options I can set in here, which are all pretty self-explanatory. So I can choose if I want to create a new volume for each new LUN, or if I want to have multiple LUNs in the same volume. You can tick the checkbox to reserve space for volumes with thin provisioned LUNs, thin provisioned volume clones, and delete a volume when the last LUN in it is deleted. You can also specify the buffer space between the volume and the LUN. So the size of the volume is going to be bigger than the LUN. This is where you can specify how much space there is going to be. Okay, so that's where we can configure the provisioning options. I can also click on cluster 2, and that will take me to this page here. I can see a summary of the information which is known about cluster 2 when the page refreshes. So I can see how many ESXi hosts are using this storage, how many virtual machines and data stores there are, the protocols that are in use, and how many network interfaces, etc. I've also got the host tab, and in here I will see that it's currently just ESXi1 which is connected in there. I can view information about the logical interfaces on the ONTAP cluster, information about the data stores. I can see my SAN data store, and I've also got a tab for my NAS data store. And I can also click on the virtual machine tab to see the virtual machines that are using those data stores. Okay, last thing that I want to show you is the reporting. So if I go back to the overview page and then click on traditional dashboard, I can see information about my data stores and my virtual machines in there. Should be able to, just have to wait for it to refresh. There we go. So I can see my data stores and the virtual machines. If I go to the vVol dashboard, I'm not going to see anything in here right now because I don't have vVol data stores configured, and also I don't have the VSC integrated with on-command API services. I can go down to the reports as well. I can click on my data store report, and I'm going to see statistics about my 2 different data stores. And I can also click on the virtual machine report, and I'll see statistics about my virtual machines. Thanks for watching. If you want to get hands-on practice with NetApp storage for free on your laptop, then you can download my free ebook, which you can see above my head right now. Also check out my NetApp Storage Complete course, which will teach you everything you could possibly want to know about ONTAP. Thanks.